JD, what
but
do
I
you think of
misspoke.
Wes Anderson? You like him? You don't like him, do you?
No. I feel about Wes Anderson in the same ways that you guys have talked about something like There Will Be Blood or Raiders of the Lost Ark, and how defining those movies are for you in terms of your cinephilia. That's Wes Anderson for me. Wes Anderson is
okay.
kind of my entry into, hey, movies are different. They're not.
He's your formative guy.
Oh, that's
He
awesome.
is my formative guy, 100%. And
I actually didn't know that about you. That's cool. That's cool.
yeah, so Wes Anderson, I have
Well, you know.
loved from the very beginning. He's always been my dude. And I think why I will push back against I guess that criticism, because I don't look at it any differently than any other artist and how they have their own distinct style. Like, nobody talks about Scorsese and how you know it's a Scorsese film just by watching it, or Tarantino, but those aren't criticisms. Those are often, they're lofted as praises for those filmmakers. Or Hans Zimmer and how he's known to be as a composer. And maybe
Coens.
that's a little bit of a criticism toward him, but mostly people love his scores. Or John Williams. A lot of John Williams scores have the same tonality behind them, and yet we love
because
them.
they make the hairs raise up on your arms.
They make you weep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or any musical band out there that you love, a lot of their albums might not be verbatim the same, but they have a flavor that is attached to them that you love. And that's how I feel about Wes Anderson. Is there a tonal symmetry, perhaps a little bit of a visual symmetry that makes
Literally
up
and
the nucleus of
figuratively,
who
yes.
he is? Yes. Are the films verbatim the same? Absolutely not. And to claim that is disingenuous.
I agree with that. And I think the reason why I think maybe that criticism exists is because it's so easy, to your point, Jay, that you mentioned earlier, from a very, like, a long bird's eye view, a 3,000 feet away view, I think, as you called it. It's easy to latch on to the symmetry because it's right there in front of you.
It's baby's first auteur. You watch Tim Burton movies when you're young, and it's like, oh, these feel like they're made by the same person. And that's kind of how Wes Anderson.
That's actually a really good
well.
comparison, to be honest with you, Jay. Because
especially
that's
early
Wes
Burton, when he didn't get sucked into CGI fest.
Right. Well, yeah, it's totally up until, like, right
Sleepy
before
Hollow.
Planet of the Apes is kind of.
I'd still put Big Fish in there, but
but Sweeney, even his version of Sweeney Todd's very much like.
But
Probably his
you know what I'm
last
talking
great
about with
movie.
early Edward Scissorhands.
I
everything
think
practical,
everything
gothic, gravestone
Alice
like.
in Wonderland
Yeah.
is really still got his DNA in it. Yeah, I think that like I agree with you, JD. I mean, like I think of the Coen brothers. They were they were another
they are
band
and
of,
they aren't. I think they're
I
a
no,
lot
they
more
they
diverse
they
than-
their style,
I'm with Jay.
their sense of I think more maybe not visually, but definitely textually in the way that they
maybe
construct
when
characters.
Wes Anderson makes his No Country for Old Men, I'll rethink that opinion. But
I mean, I would love to see the Coen brothers get back together. Oh wait, that's right. That's not going to happen.
that's crazy.
But
the Safdies, the Coens, what are we doing?
But I mean, you look at even somebody like arguably the biggest director on the planet, Nolan. He has his own aesthetics and things that he does throughout his films that people find super annoying, or they're able to pull out commonalities that
You know when you're watching a Nolan movie.
Yeah, you know when you're watching a Nolan movie.
And I think those are fair criticisms as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason I wanted to bring up that that comparison is because I think it's just funny to me how people can bring up those criticisms with Wes Anderson when it can easily be lofted at a lot of other artists. So to me, I don't get bogged down in any of that. And you guys spoke to how his filmography is actually quite distinctive, or maybe more nuanced than what it gets credit for. I mean, those first three films are kind of their own thing, and you certainly start to see the swings with Sisu and Darjeeling Limited. But I still think those are quite different than what you get post Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like, those films kind of have their own little setting, but you start to see the formation
Darjeeling
of
is a
Wes.
lot different than Zissou.
I agree, but even tonally, in terms of the editing and writing, you start to see Wes forming who he would become later. And the animated films, I think, are also different, even though, again, tonally, editing, writing, the nucleus of Anderson is there, but visually are their own animals, pun intended.
Nice work.
And then you get to Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest and French Dispatch. And yes, those are the classic Wes Anderson dollhouse aesthetics. But to what, I forget who said this earlier, but the idea of watching every single one of these back to back, the reason I don't find them tiresome, aside from, again, there's an evolution with the first three, then Suzu, Limited, the animated films, and then what we get later on. Like, that evolution is almost enough for me. But even if I'm watching Moonrise Kingdom, Grand Budapest, and French Dispatch back to back to back, they are so vastly different in terms of the color palette and how immersive those films are regarding Wes's directions. When you consider the yellow, like the saturation of Moonrise in terms of the yellow and brown hues is so distinctly and vividly different than the pink and brighter hues of Grand Budapest or the blue hues of the French Dispatch. So the nucleus of Wes might be the same in all of those, but the color palette is different. The stories and the characters are their own thing. Then you add in the humor of it all is you're talking about there, Ryan, or the sincerity of a lot of these films. I do love the sleight of hand or the balancing act, if you will, of how he's able to, offer a lot of humor, but also make them sincere and poignant and also thematically very rich. And to me, that's what I love about Wes. There is a quirkiness to him for sure. And perhaps that will leave some disengaged, I guess, but I love it. To me, like I from film to film, the DNA of who he is there, but I think the nuances, the gray areas are so wildly different that makes him fascinating to me. So to me, watching a Wes Anderson film is no different than a Scorsese or Tarantino or Nolan, and how I know that I'm watching those guys, but it's not always the same.
And
I think Wes should get more credit for that.
Yeah.